Ready to do this?
Yeah.
All right, I'll make this official and then pass the baton over. I'm extremely excited about that. Okay, everybody, we have survived another week in the plague. So that's the exciting news. The even more exciting news for me is tonight's presentation, which is on the incredibly beautiful Chicago Guildbook. So Heather had wanted me to give you guys a little context about the book. And I'm kind of excited to do it because this thing has grown dramatically from what I envisioned. But basically, this is another tradition of ours that comes back to the medieval period and specifically to the fencing guilds that we all share. Yes, so that is me looking a little drunk, which I probably am, no doubt telling some sort of bullshit story. So thank you, Heather, for picking that picture. Okay, so anyway, you see the Once Upon a Time, and you see the book over there to the side. So where this comes from is we know that the fencing guilds historically all kept log books, register books. And in fact, the reason we know so much about the London Company of Masters is that the Sloane manuscripts have a complete recording of their business. And so this tells us what their oaths were, which is where, by the way, our scholar oaths come from. It tells us who played the prize, what weapons they played with, what date, who showed up to challenge them, etc. And the German fencing guilds had these, the Belgian fencing guilds had these, the French guilds had these. And in fact, the only reason we know things like some of the fencing rules held by the German and Belgian guilds is because they were recorded in their guild books. Now, in fact, the oldest surviving and continuously updated one is of the oldest fencing club in the world, which is in Belgium. Our friend Bert Gabert belongs to it. It is the Guild of, I can't remember if it's St. Michael or St. Martin, one of the martial saints. Anyway, they are located in Bruges. They have been continuous, well, not continuously, I'll get to that in a moment. But their origins,
St. Michael.
St. Michael, yeah, you've been there. So their origins go back to the late 15th century, and except during a hiatus under the Napoleonic era when the fencing guilds were shut down, and then again under World War II, they have been a fencing studio. So they have literally 500 plus years worth of records in those books. Now, that's really cool until you see what medieval register books look like. And you realize that they're just as exciting as any modern accountant's register book is right now, just with better handwriting. They are mostly just dates and line items. You know, August 13th, year of our Lord, 1592. There was a dispute between this guy, and the vote was to do this. August 15th. He disputed our decision and we unanimously voted against him. A month goes by, and it's that sort of thing. So they're not nearly as exciting as what you're about to see. However, some of the nicer versions of various guild books from high-end guilds often had a illuminated introduction to the history of the city and its guild. They often had the arms of the principal guild masters put in there, or anyone who had achieved a journeyman rank usually would have, if they had arms, those listed in there. So I kind of came up with this idea of creating something similar for the CSG that would be an illustrated register of our history. And the book itself was made by a place called Brahms Bookworks, which is actually a guy who largely works for the neo-pagan community, doing essentially grimoires for like Wiccans and ceremonial books for, he actually does a bunch of things for Unitarian churches, and I think it's going to be kind of a ceremonial leather-bound book. Christian Tobler had found him and had recommended him to me, and so I kind of told him a little bit about it, sent him some pictures of what we were thinking about, and he created what you see there with the beautifully raised and carved version of the guild arms mounted on a bound leather book. So that was the process, and this thing is huge. If you haven't seen it at a prize play, it's, you know, you could beat someone to death with the guild book. It's probably a good 6-7 pounds of paper, of parchment paper. And so the question was what to do with it. And I certainly am not up to the task of illuminating a book, but there is a lot of digital art. So I kind of slowly started creating some just basic digital files to map out our ceremonial and our history. And at the same time, the RMSG decided they needed a guild book of their own. And Douglas began to have each person who played the prize submit their coat of arms. And when they were approved, he did a full-page digital spread of their coat of arms. So I thought, oh, that's really cool, and we should do something like that too. And I didn't really think about the fact that we have a guild with a number of talented, both professional, semi-professional, and amateur artists. And my little idea kind of mushroomed. So what you're going to see was an idea I had, but that is entirely really the brainchild of the 4 people who are going to present. And it is something really spectacular. We usually only bring it out at the various prize plays, although at the Guild birthday party, I think this year, Heather, you had it on display, didn't you?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, and I think that's something maybe we'll do in the future because people don't get to see it enough. So what you're going to take a look at tonight is a little bit of the book, what it contains, and then each of the artists is going to tell you a little bit about how they go about creating pages from it. So this is very much a living document. And one of the other things I just wanted to point out is that although it is inspired by 14th, 15th, 16th century works, it is a product of the 21st century, which means that the artists have not been constrained to make sure that everything is, from 1482. We are a living modern organization, and so they've woven that in a very medieval way into what they've done. So with that, I'm going to step down off the podium and pass it to Heather. All yours.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just gonna get us warmed up here before I pass things off to the artists. So as Greg mentioned on the earlier slide, this is the Guildbook. As you can see here, it's a pretty hefty tome, if you will. But we've been doing our best to try to start filling these pages. I didn't give you a cross-section view here. I kind of wish I had actually now, but I'm sure you've seen it at a prize play. I mean, the book is 2.5 to 3 inches thick, so it's there's a lot of pages for us to work on, to be sure. All right, so I just wanted to take us a little bit through what the format of the book is, so you have an understanding of what the pages are that you're going to be seeing. So the presentation today actually is an opportunity for each artist to take some time to go through 2 examples of their artwork, and they're going to talk you through that artwork, explain their thoughts and motivations for that work, and also provide some historical examples. So that's primarily what you guys will be seeing today. But before we get into that, I figured I would lay out the book for you. So the Great Book of the Chicago Swordplay Guild is essentially divided into 4 parts. So the first section is of the Great Book of the Chicago Swordplay Guild, or of the Guild. That first section is actually contains establishment documents for the school itself. It contains establishment documents for sister schools and also some group chapters documents as well. The other big portion of that chapter is the poetic history of the Guild, which is something that Greg has been working on. And I think so far he's got it drafted through like 2001. So there's quite a bit of history that is still out there for us to hear about and find out about. So that's going to be a very exciting part of the book once it is in the book. Okay, the next section is of the prizes and the prize play. That section is going to be the one that most of you would be familiar with and have probably seen at the prize plays, but it includes the investiture ceremonies and the oaths for scholar level and free scholar level. It includes announcement pages for both the Armatsari side of the house and the Renaissance side of the house for both scholar and free scholar. and it includes all of our prize play logs. So scholar prize play logs, free scholar prize play logs for both sides of the house. So that's a pretty extensive portion of the book. Then we also have a section that Greg alluded to, which is the of the prizers or of the scholars section. So that section is the portion that will contain the catalog of the arms of the guild. So the catalog of all of the guild members' arms, or those who choose to participate in that section. And there you'll see Dean, Provost, Free Scholar, and Scholar Heraldic achievements. And that's something we're just getting started on as a group. So that's very exciting. The final section, and it's actually a new section. It's not something that was present when we first set out, when the Guild artists first set out to take on this project for Greg. But that would be the of the Cavaliers section. So Jesse's built this pretty impressive group of Cavaliers, and he asked to have that group included in the book in some way. And since they're basically junior guild members to a degree, we offered to let them create artwork and contribute to a section of the book. So that section includes their ceremonial documents, as well as their rank achievements or their basically prize play logs. So if you do get a chance to look in the book, if you scroll to the final chapter, you'll see some really impressive artwork by the Cavaliers. So just to explain what you're seeing off to the right side of the screen here, we've got 3 examples of what some of the various types of artwork look like. So at the top, you'll see this is a divider page. It is one of the pages where we as artists get to have free reign over the design, content, and everything that page involves. You'll actually see some of these pages, some of the artists tonight are going to be going over these their pages themselves. So you'll get an opportunity to see what that really entails. The second page, the one in the middle there, is an example of one of the ceremonial pages. So it's a page where the text content needs to be present. And then as artists, we have the opportunity to design and fill in the space around the text content. So whether that would be an investiture ceremony or an announcement or an oath or something like that. The final page, again, would be the style of page that folks would be most familiar with, and that's a prize play log. So that's a page where, again, the group decided how we would try to catalog and list out prize plays, and designed the central portion, and then each individual artist gets to take up a page and fill in the artistic content around that. But the central portion, the prize play log portion, stays the same and consistent for those pages. All right. Okay, so here's just a couple of images of the artists at work. So when we first started the artwork adventure, that is the Guildbook, we actually took some time to have drawing sessions together. So you'll see here's a couple of illuminating, or here's us working on an illuminating session. You'll see Becky, Vic, and Aaron are all in the image there. And I really like these pictures because I actually feel like, we look like monks in a way. If you were to put us in garb, we're all hunched over our artwork. There's various light sources. I mean, those could basically be candles. So anyway, I feel like they really sort of draw on the spirit of, doing tiny artwork.
I think we can recreate that one day. We should try.
It's worth trying for sure. Yeah. Okay. So with that, I am going to hand things off to our first artist, Vic. And I wanted to say for the people who are listening in, if you have questions, feel free to, enter them into the chat. Or if you have questions for your specific artist, maybe wait until they're at least done presenting their content for their specific page that they're discussing. And then I think everybody's open to letting folks chime in with questions that they have for specific artists. So maybe just listen for the prompts, and don't directly interrupt someone while they're talking about their beautiful artwork. But we definitely want to hear your questions. So if you have them, please feel free to ask them. Okay, and now with that, let's go to Vic.
Hello. So this was my first page. It's one of the Played the Prize pages where we log who successfully played their prize with the guild. As far as imagery goes, I was just sort of wanting to reference the tradition and also the fact that it is unique to Chicago, the locale. So as far as imagery goes, the very top banner, actually to the left, top left, I drew off of the Lady in the Lake kind of mythological image, considering we are right next to Lake Michigan, with a heater shield style with the Chicago flag emblazoned on it. And, she's holding aloft a long sword coming out of the lake. Along the top also, there's just a reference to the Windy City. To the right, top right, we have an image that everybody here is familiar with, which is the image that Nicole has on our WMAW t-shirts. I just love that image, so I wanted to capture a little bit of that here. Along the sides, just some flowery scroll work. I was just sort of warming up and playing around a little bit with how I wanted to, with borders. And along the bottom, I chose a couple of animals that a couple of our animals, I suppose, that I felt probably that well, first of all, wanted to draw and paint. Secondly, that I felt was probably appropriate for the scholar rank. So you have the Lion of Audacia on the right. And that came from a book of bestiary, a bestiary book that we had available to all of us that evening, that first evening, the pictures of which you saw in the previous slide. And I love that image of the lion. I put some fire around him to sort of hint at Audacia. And on the left, we have the lynx, Prudentia, as scholars begin to really delve into the tactical work of combat. And in the middle, of course, we have Fiore himself. I took that image from one of the masters of Abrazare. So, and here are those sources. As a matter of fact, on the left is a page from the Bestiary by Richard Barber, and specifically with actually the imagery that I use as a reference for that particular drawing. And of course, up on top there, we have Fiore in his dominant Abrazare position, and the WMAW logo that I pretty much lifted straight from the shirt. So.
All right.
And this is still a work in progress. This is my of the prizes and prize play divider page, which I still have on my desk right now. This was a lot of fun. I changed the background very recently, actually. And as we can see, that banner that's going to go across is going to have the lettering for the divider. And we have two images bordered by scholars garters. The image on the top is references one of the longsword plays. Specifically, I believe that's the sword grab, one of the sword grab plays, taken straight from the Fior di Battaglia. However, I did adapt the image to include a reference to how we dress and fight. So we have, Tyndall mask on the left and like a more modern sort of HEMA fencing mask on the right. I use our Gambison styling gauntlets, and yes, Justin's arm protection on the figure on the right. Also, I didn't want to reference anybody in particular, but I did want to hint at our scholars, or our prizers, I should say. So I, changed some details around, like I changed the color of the gambesons and whatnot, but I wanted to sort of adapt it I wanted to adapt the play, the image of the play, of that particular longsword play, with more modern and particularly our garb and our fighters. And as you can see, the background there is actually a reference to Pulaski Park, for those of you who were there. Not much of a reference, really, just sort of the drab wall and whatnot. For those of you who were there, you might remember, and for those of you who weren't, there was sort of a raised theater space on the side, and there was like a big mural around it that was really, really cool, but I didn't have those references, nor did I really want to invest that much, nor did I know how to fit that into the image. So anyway, I figured the walls and the floor would suffice. And the bottom image we have is clearly Forteza with the beautiful exposed brick. And I honestly don't remember where I took that image. It was a while since I put that together. I want to say that was either a photo of a prize play, or it might have been a historical play that I found online, which I don't know which one it was. I think actually it was probably from a prize play or from a bout. And I chose that one because I think I was working on that, on the riposte in Seconda myself, and I really quite liked it. So yeah, and again, adapting it to reference the fighters in the guild today. You can see we have the one of the swords hanging on the walls, the paint, the reprints of the pages from Flower of Battle. And over on the left, top left now, we have the corner image, top corner image, which is a picture of Greg in historical garb, making a fantastic face for that picture. I think I have the reference a little bit later on, but I wanted to put that up on the top left, sort of as he's sort of judging the the Armazari fighters. And we have a couple of images of the fighters themselves. And on the bottom right, I have an image of John Amara from, I think, one of his instructor profile pictures, which again, we'll have, I think, on the next slide. The backgrounds that I changed, I wanted to reference sort of medieval and Renaissance styles. And so on the left, we have a fleur-de-lis pattern, which I know is French, but I was looking for what I felt was an iconic medieval sort of pattern image, and something that was unmistakably medieval. And on the right is some scroll work that I drew from sort of patterns that might be more Renaissance in flavor. And my goal, and I'm a little leery to start this, is to use silver foil for the fleur-de-lis and gold for the Renaissance pattern on the right. So as far as inspiration goes for this page, we have the image of Greg and John that I wanted to work off of, and we have pictures of a variety of fleur-de-lis styles, and the color combination of the red and gold for the Renaissance side, and as well as an image of some of the scroll work, some of the scrolling vine work that I wanted to not necessarily copy, but hint at.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Chat. Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you, Tasha. And yeah, I love those pictures, Alicia. So, in the actual from Ingvar 1990. In the actual book, do you do hand illuminations or create traditional original and then print the pages? All by hand, really. I think we do some, we might put down like printed sort of structures for the page that we can work off of, but all the illuminations are done by hand. So, yeah. So those are my pages.
All right. I think that means that Erin is up next. So I'm gonna hand it off to Erin.
All right, cool. Can you guys hear me okay?
Coming in clear.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so this is, I did a series of played the prize pages for the scholar list based around the 4 animals that are in the Sanyo. And in there is also a 5th element. You have your 4 traditional elements, and Fiore himself is the 5th. So you would have your earth, air, fire, and water. But many people might wonder, what is the 5th element? And I found this page to be actually rather tricky to do because a lot of it is, it's really uncertain how to kind of do the research on what the 5th element is. It's not really spelled out the way the 4 elements in matter are here on Earth. So with some talk with Greg about it and suggesting some books for me to read on the subject, took me about a year of research to kind of get through a couple books, try to kind of do the research that I needed to do. And it kind of dives into a number of things that are well, just goes into a lot of things. So the 5th element here is quintessence. That is it comes from the Latin word for quinta essence, which is what they would have called it back in the medieval period. And what exactly is quintessence, though, is the question. If you were to type quintessence into your search engine, you'd get a number of things. You'd get something along the lines of alchemy, something along the lines of ether, and then you even get Carl Jung in the more recent time taking it into philosophy. But quintessence is essentially, the element for quintessence is essentially spirit, and it goes along the lines of perfectionism. So Aristotle, at one point back in the day, would have said that quintessence is would be let me see if I can pull my notes up here. Would be ether, but ether, there's an interesting period when the Dark Ages comes around that when the Greek is kind of put aside, by the time the Renaissance comes back around, ether comes back around somewhere in like the 16th or 17th century. You can correct me on that, Greg. I believe that's around the period it comes back. But the aristocrats and the nobles still would have felt that what Aristotle had to say was still pretty on point. So even though a lot of the period, a lot of the information in the Dark Ages and the medieval period were kind of sort of lost, it seems that a lot of the upper aristocrats would have still believed it. So I chose to go along with Aristotle's view of what quintessence was. And what this page has up on the top is the Ouroboros, which is a symbol for unity. It is a symbol for rebirth and death and the cycle of life. And it also, with the black and the white, is a symbol of opposites in harmony, or harmony through opposites. So you can't have good without the bad, and vice versa. And Hermes had a quote where, as above, so below. That continues on as within, so without, as the universe, so the soul. So the whole page is designed in a way that the center is 2 compartments, and the right and the left consist of 5 compartments, and they all equal 7. 5 being the 5th element is a symbol for man, and 7 is a symbol for perfectionism. So on the right side of the page follows the track of alchemy, and the left side of the page follows the track of the soul. So the white circle in the top left is a symbol for the soul, for the spirit, and in the top right of the arch is the seal of Solomon, which at the time was the symbol for the Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone, as you might know it today, is the 4 elements put together, which is something that came later in the period. So I wanted to kind of stay, since I actually was taking Fiore himself to put into this page, I really wanted to stick with early 15th century thinking. So it was a little tricky to do because alchemy at the time was so secretive that you couldn't, a lot of stuff, if it was written down, was in code, or was barely written down, and really wasn't handed out, and you didn't get to something written out until you had pages that were actually painted. You didn't get that until, let's see, what did I have down here? The Aurora Consurgens. I think I'm saying that right. You do have an earlier book. It's the early illustrations from Cleopatra the Alchemist in the 10th century. Had some illustrations, but they're kind of shapes. There's an Ouroboros in there that's also half black and half white. And but the Aurora Consurgens is one of the first manuscripts to come out that has actual imagery put into it. But as far as the rest of the symbolism on the page, a lot of it is also numerology and opposites. So you have the right side of the Philosopher's Stone is in gilded in gold, and it has a rose bush of 5 roses, and then a lily bush of 5 budded flowers and 2 unbudded flowers, or 5 bloomed flowers and 2 budded flowers. I know. So you have 5 there as the number 5, and you have 2. The number 2 is duality. It also is opposites. So when you get to the left side, you have 2 white. God, where did they? 2 white mink. Yeah, minks. 2 white minks. One is not proportioned to its age, but has a full white tail, and the other mink has a black tip. And then you have a white candle, and then you have a white swan. And so white is an iconic color, or you wouldn't want to call it color, but in this page, because white is also purity. White represents purity. These white minks were considered to be pure, and the white swan was considered to be pure. We also have a white dove, as a dove is a symbol for spirit as well. And then when you get to the bottom, when you get to that bottom section and the top section, that's where the Hermes quote comes out, the as above, so below. You have the heavens and the celestial plane up top, and then you have the earthy plane at the bottom. And behind the earth plane, you have the celestial spheres. And I chose the celestial spheres based off of Ptolemy and Aristotle, that there would be, you would have your 4 main elements, and then you would have 9 celestial spheres. So you'd have you'd have 10 celestial, well, there would be 10 celestial spheres. You'd have, let's see, you'd have the 5 planets, the moon and the sun, and then you have a firmament, which is the plane of stars. Later on, let's see, a gentleman wrote a book. His name was, I literally wrote a paper to myself, so I remember all this. Where is this information at? Well, now I can't find it. But anyway, a gentleman later, in the later 15th century, later in the 15th part of the set, later during the 15th century, added on 2 other layers to that kind of picked up some steam, which was the premium mobile and the Empyrean, which is the realm of the gods and the angels. And these planes did exist for the Ptolemaic system as well, but you don't see it really kind of drawn out in color or kind of illustrated until a little bit later. And then in here you also have the tree of life on the right and the tree of knowledge on the left as also being your opposites. So that's that page. So, and the next slide is of the some of the images that I used to kind of influence how I was going to draw this. The image here with the half circles of the red and the white with the earth in the center, that's one of the Ptolemaic celestial spheres. And the right is that the one very far to the right is the image that I used to pick up where how you might want to draw the Imperium and the Premium Mobile. I think I'm saying all this right. That I thought was kind of very interesting. The top on the left, you have an Ouroboros that I liked, the winged dragon. Sometimes the Ouroboros is a snake eating itself, and sometimes it's a dragon, and sometimes the dragon is eating a snake that's eating a dragon, which is quite interesting. And then the top right is the part of the Philosopher's Stone. I really didn't touch on the Philosopher's Stone, but the Philosopher's Stone is, in essence, the process of creating the Philosopher's Stone, which is supposed to be the most perfect object that you could create, is a symbolism of purity and a symbolism of perfection and a symbolism of completion. As a process called the magnum opus. And so a lot of people might see that a magnum opus is being referred to your greatest creation of some sort, like a magnum opus in music or a magnum opus in art. And the Philosopher's Stone, in order to create the Philosopher's Stone, somewhere in the 15th, 16th century or so, it changed from 4 processes to 3 processes. You can see on the left here, you have a dragon holding like a half moon shape of red, white, and black. And these are representative of the 3 stages of creating the Philosopher's Stone. And there is a 4th stage in there, the yellow stage, which I included in my image that the Ouroboros is holding. Because at the time, yellow was still a stage that they would have thought was worth noting. But this stage of creating, this final stage, the red stage of creating the Philosopher's Stone is basically the burning of this dragon, or the burning of a phoenix. The phoenix is also a symbol of the Philosopher's Stone. And getting to this stage is where that Philosopher's Stone is created. And then you have in the bottom center here with the blue half circles is a type of calendar, but I liked using this half moon shape to map out my celestial spheres. So that is my quintessence page. And then this is the page. I created 2 pages for Jesse. The second one I think is right behind it, but this is Jesse's provost page when he played his prize for provost. And so these 2 pages were specifically meant just for him. So I decided to go along the lines of incorporating something of Celtic design, of Viking design, and keeping still in tradition of the time during Fiore. So I tried to kind of mesh them together. I really enjoyed the gilded large initials, the first initials, and I really find it interesting the images that you can put inside the letters. And I think these giant letters that are just beautifully painted are very, 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 very pretty to look at. So I wanted to kind of incorporate a lot of the traditional design of the text that could go into these pages, including the large initial and then some of the initials into the text itself. And I kept on to part of Jesse's wolf as his in his arms, and I put his arms on his banner at the bottom with the wolves holding it, and tried to incorporate the Scandinavian designs. When the Viking designs kind of meshed with Celtic designs, they kind of had these knotted animals, which I think are kind of fascinating. And so I wanted to kind of knot up his wolf a little bit. And then I put the main weapons that he had to play his prize with on the top. And of course, the guild arms, of course, is for the school. And then this is the second page, which was dedicated to the instructors that had to test him through the International Armazari Society. So I put in the banner the quote for the provost, and then I incorporated the 4 fjording animals, but kind of designing them in a way that had the Viking look to them, and then kept the Celtic knots. I also really enjoyed what it would look like to think about what it would look like to have an actual illumination in it. I came to find that the illuminations themselves are actually the pictures that you can paint in there. So I thought it would be kind of neat to put a scene in there of Jesse in his armor with a wolf teaching to some students. So that was my inspiration for that. And his pages have other small things in there that represent him. On the previous page, I forgot to note, but there's like a trail of pigs that are going up the side. And yeah, so on the right.
Erin, I had a question for you.
Yeah.
So this page, or these 2 pages, is this a composition? Sorry, not the artistic composition, but just the textual layout. Are these pages that you designed yourself?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah. Awesome. And I talked to Christian Cameron about, because he's doing a lot of calligraphy as well, and I talked to him about a style of text that would be suitable for the period of Fiore. And this is the text that he has sent me. So I chose to use it. It's interesting.
I've got the chat open, and I don't know if I see any. I don't know if you can see the chat as well.
Oh yeah.
Okay, you got it. Okay.
Yeah, I asked in there, Erin, can you translate the motto at the top for everybody?
I don't have that out with me at the moment. Can I get back to you guys on that?
Yeah, I think it means art teaches and sustains, but I just wanted to double check.
Yeah, it's probably buried very far into my emails at this point. I can dig it out and put it up there. Oh. Yeah, so that's that page. And then my inspirations for that page. Yeah, so I like the design of the heavy gild work that kind of traces along the edges. I wanted to try using that. And then the left is an image from something from, I think it's either Ravenna or maybe it's just Ravenna. There's another city right around Ravenna. Greg, do you remember what it is that did a lot of the illuminations? Maybe not.
I don't off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
That's okay. There's another city right around Ravenna that that has a lot of these beautiful illuminations coming out of. A lot of it was the inspiration for the Sanyo that I painted in the Guild Hall. But these smaller initials were my inspiration in Jesse's page. A lot of the scroll work that kind of trails down the side of the text is what I used. So yeah, that's those are my pages.
It looks like there's a question in the chat from Rabin.
Celtic symbols.
Yes.
Well, there are no necessarily specific Celtic symbols in my pages. Just the Celtic knots, just a standard Celtic knot. But when the Vikings came over to the UK, they brought over their designs that got incorporated into the Celtic designs, which is what created the animal shapes in the Celtic knots. So that is something that happened after the Vikings had come around. So my designs of incorporating that, like you can see in this image at the top right, is where some of these animal shapes are coming from, is reminiscent of how I wanted to pull in the Viking stuff for Jesse. So I just wanted to take his wolf and the Fiore animals and try to turn them into Scandinavian shapes. But they don't really have anything else that they represent Celtic-wise, if that's what you're asking about. But that's what I got.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, if there aren't any other questions for Aaron, I think that means I'm next. All right, okay. Okay, so I am Heather Hilchey, and I will be going over a couple of my pages with you. So this first set of pages is actually a series of 3, but they all go together. So I should be able to pretty quickly pass through them, since they're all the artwork is similar and inspired by the same content. So this is actually my Of the Fathers of the Noble Art of Defense pages. These are pages that were written up by Greg, specifically describing the masters of the art. And so these pages occur toward the beginning of the book in our sort of poetic history section, or at the start of the poetic history section. Specifically for these pages, because they refer to the masters of the arts, I wanted to incorporate the masters. So for those masters where I could find their images or reasonable, presumable representations of them, I chose those. And I also wanted to incorporate animals. So I thought it would be fun to try to figure out a way to work in the Fiore animals, but also find animals that would be representations for the later masters. And so one of my goals was to intermix the masters with the animals that might represent them. So that was something I actually randomly reached out to Greg at one point and basically gave him no context. But I was like, if you were to turn any of the masters into an animal, or what animal would represent them? And then use those to help inspire the composition here. So you'll see, for example, the elephant on the left hand side of the page shared his legs or her legs with Fiore on the right hand side of the page. And then I chose to replace the lower half of the elephant with the castle. So it's sort of a flip or inversion of the elephant holding the castle, rather the castle is the lower half of the elephant. I also did a couple of other fun things on this page in particular. You can see there's a ram, and the lower half of the ram is actually on Vadi here in the lower right hand corner of the page. And then I gave the ram the lower half of the lynx. So it was just kind of fun to figure out ways to mix up these animals in a fun way that was also very often represented in the manuscripts, where they would be mixing and matching beasts and making funky little creatures in the margins. Oh, one other thing to note on this page is you may see down at the bottom, I actually incorporated the arms of the various cities that the masters came from. So we should see represented there Cividale, Pisa, Bologna, and there's at least one other. But anyway, those are all accurate and historical arms for these Italian cities. So the next page actually just, the next 2 pages follow along with that same idea, but I'll point out a couple of items to note. So again, I did this mixing of the beasties and gave the top half of the lion and the bottom half of the tiger. Those are both creatures from the Segno. We'll also see here one of the masters, and actually I think what we got there. Yeah, one of the masters, and we've got down at the bottom hand portion of the page, I didn't have a representation of our Bolognese master, Marozzo, so I chose to put in little fencing devils, fencing in the Bolognese style. So I thought that would be a fun representation. Oh, sorry, yes, and that's Silver up there, since he's spoken about in this section. All right, and then the last of this series of pages, we start to head in the histories towards the Renaissance time period. And so I wanted to represent some things, I wanted to represent some more scholarly aspects, and also I had the opportunity to have a little bit more fun in terms of the creatures I incorporated. So I specifically included cranes and cats because they felt more Renaissancean to me, if you will, in part in their like elegance and then their you know, body forms, and it seemed to evoke to me the feeling of the Renaissance fencing style. And then in this instance, when I asked Greg what animal would represent Fabris, he said a snake. So that's why we have Fabris with the lower half of a snake. But actually, I really enjoyed that, and I was like, oh yeah, I can totally see how that would be a cool conjunction, and also sort of representative of the movements of rapier fencing. So that's what we have here. There's also one other fun little note. Oh wait, here's my little kitty, which is this snail shell on top of the scholarly owl. So there's another Renaissance page that you'll see in the book in a later section. And there's a snail shell of a similar style. So for me, it was a fun little tie-in with a different set of artwork that I did. Oh, and I see Greg said he was thinking of sinuousness. So yes, I agree with you, Greg. I completely agree. And hopefully I was able to represent the sinuous, regal stance of Fabris. So here are some of my inspirations. My primary inspiration for the style of the artwork in the margins was the Loutrell Psalter. I really enjoyed all the fun and fantastical creatures that were incorporated in that manuscript. And I also, you'll see I was straight up following the border patterns, you know, some of these interlocking leaves with lines and all sorts of stuff. So I had a fun time really digging into those, the historical examples, and then trying to recreate those in some way. Also, you'll see here, we've got a little image of Vadi and his body butt there. So that's why we got the little, on that particular page, we had him all fawning out. Again, you know, including some fencing in the margins. That's something that's, you know, very present in these manuscripts. Even here's on the lower left-hand side is an example of a funky little creature with a shell on his head. And of course, on the top right-hand side, an example of the elephant and castle, or the elephant with the tower. So, all right, I will, if there aren't any questions, anybody have any questions about this particular set of pages? So I'll move on to the next.
Can I ask why silver has monkey legs?
Greg. So I think it was, I think the answer I'd gotten was ape. So I think I'd gotten ape, or that might have been, you know.
That's right. It was in honor of Steve Hand being George Silverback.
Well, then I probably should have. So I chose orangutan. I was like, you know, based on his complexion, I feel like he would have orangutan legs. So that's what I gave him. But
Yeah.
maybe I should have gone, you know, more silverback. Anyway.
Nope. Sorry, Sid. Nothing so strange and mysterious.
All right.
Would be a manuscript at least in snail reference.
Okay. All right. Well, I will head on to the next page. Okay. And so here, this is just a single page, but this is an announcement page for the Renaissance Free Scholar section. So the part that I guess I found so enjoyable about creating this artwork, there are actually two things. So one was just the opportunity to think a little bit about the Renaissance context and what elements would be important to represent. I honestly felt like for some of the medieval stuff, it was easier because it's like, well, we just pull out, you know, you know, the Getty, or pull out, you know, Fiore's manuscript. You know, let's, you know, put some Fiore animals in there. Let's look at, you know, all these medieval examples. And so this has actually been a very long running page for me. I would like work on it and then put it away. And so the composition coming together was a really long time in coming. And some of you Renaissance people, if that are on the call, you might remember me even asking you questions about this, like, what, you know, which plates from the manuscript would be good plates to use? And this was probably like 3 years ago that I was asking about this. So this took me a long time to really pull together. But I am really happy with, and I loved what came together. And this is, you know, kind of one of my favorite pages. The other part of this that was fun for me and also challenging was the calligraphy. So I decided I wanted to take on doing the calligraphy myself, and it's a fun challenge. It's also incredibly stressful because there's this idea of like at any point you could screw it up and then have to start all over, or have to try to come up with a way to salvage it. So there's something very energizing in that, like, you know, be like, okay, I'm going to do this tonight, and I'm going to be ready, and I'm going to be really careful, and I'm going to not screw it up. And so, you know, once that is done, there's this like victory, or at least this feeling of victory of like, oh my gosh, I didn't totally screw it up. So that was something that I really enjoyed doing for this, and, you know, ultimately finishing it at the end, writing out Chicago Swordblade Guild, and not having misspelled something. Hopefully, I'm still waiting for that word to pop out that is not spelled correctly, but that's something that I actually really enjoyed as well. So let's see, point out a couple of little fun elements. So you'll see up at the top there, this is the winged lion, the Guild's winged lion. I actually decided to make the lion a little bit more lion-y, have a bigger mane. But this particular lion example is actually something, is an architectural element that I see downtown when I take the train into work. So that was another part of the inspiration, was that I actually kind of pulled in some elements from Chicago architecture. that I felt at least fit with the historical context of the, the Renaissance manuscripts. Down on the lower left here, and then also on the right, you'll see the fencers. The fun thing that I did there was trying to work in not just male fencers. So we get the opportunity to have female nudes as well, which again was a fun thing I thought to try to incorporate and just represent a larger, be more representative of our group of fencers and bring us all into the context. So, oh yeah. So it looks like we've got a question. Yes, the ring in the lion's mouth is a gold garter. That is correct. I need to put the clasp on there. So this page is like 99.9% done, but I still think I have a couple more things that I gotta button up. So yeah, that is a gold garter. Okay, so here are my inspiration pieces. So I actually primarily looked at Faber's texts to see if there were any artistic elements that I could use besides just the fencers themselves. And I found that those were actually pretty inspiring. There's all sorts of busts and nudes and architectural curving elements and all sorts of stuff. So I tried to use those to inspire the border. I also, you'll see I basically directly pulled these swirling flowery elements from one of Faber's manuscripts. I've been calling those the Faber's flowers. Yeah, and then I used a couple of other 15th century manuscripts for some inspiration on how to do the line work. Okay, are there any other questions? Otherwise, I'll hand it off to Becky. Nope. All right, well, next up is Becky.
Hello.
All right, good. We got you.
Hey. Great. I have been helping out with these things much more sporadically than some of the other artists. I think I've done 3 pages. Maybe we'll call it 2.5 because you'll see why in the last page. So this was a prize play log, but specifically for Renaissance. A lot of the artwork we have is more medievally, which is fine, but I wanted to make one specifically for Renaissance. And if you look at some of their artwork of the period, they love architectural elements. And I found a fantastic example that just worked perfectly. It was a picture frame for a crucifixion scene. And so I just lifted that completely. But I wanted to make it a little more glamorous. I don't think the inspiration piece was gilded. So I added gilding, but I was concerned about how much gilding. I remember putting this down thinking, oh my God, this is so much gold. but honestly, now that I look at it, it's like, actually it wasn't that much gold. This is fine. I could have done more. And I also wasn't sure if I could have gotten the shading over the gilding. But I think now that we've done gilding enough times, probably could have gotten some shading on top of the gilding. So the whole thing is a learning process. Every time you do a page, you learn something new. You know, if you ever ask Erin about gilding, you'll be there for an hour because she's got some things to tell you about gilding. So I think, Heather, did you take this picture a while ago?
Yes.
Yes, because the one thing I forgot to do, when you have silver, the swords at the bottom are silver gilt. But last time I looked at it, I was like, oh, they're black now because it's silver tarnishes. So, but there is a sealant you can put on the silver to keep it shiny. And I have noticed a few places. Silver gilt isn't as common as gold foil, and there's good reason why. It's because it tarnishes. But the few times I have seen historical examples of silver gilt, they were black as night. So now we know. Again, learning process. This is great. Want to learn with us? But the example piece was nice because it was striking. It had these like deep black backgrounds, and it was very somber and very serious. And I was like, oh, this is such a serious thing we're doing. All that work to get to a scholar, and we have a lot of fun with it. Absolutely, this is we're here because we love it. But it just kind of, I like the idea of having something very regal for such a hard accomplishment. So this was my prize play. I think the next slide is the example, and you'll see, totally lifted it. The shells, there was some symbolism in the shells, but it was been years, so I forget what the symbolism was.
Sorry, I forgot to bring up your focus pages there.
Yeah. So, but the nice thing about the gilding is I can go back and add, as a matter of fact, I think there is actually shading on that silver shell for the rapier. Yeah, so I can go back and add gilding on top of that and then seal it this time. So it's nice that you can fix things. The gilding is great. Also, you'll notice on the golds on the bottom image that you got a close up, it's kind of chunky. You know, the glue that you put down, we had a particular glue that just for the life of us could not lay it smooth. And I think Erin found a new material. She's you saw the quintessence page, and she's showing that to me. I'm like, holy shit, how's that so smooth? Because it just looks like a mirror. So materials are a huge difference. Even though it's supposed to be for gilding, it's sold for gilding, but really the applications are different. We're putting this on a flexible piece of paper, and how the different bonding materials work affect, like if it's more appropriate for a rigid object as opposed to something that's flexible like paper. So it's fascinating. So we have all the modern things that are our fingertips. We've got Amazon and Dick Blick's and all these places we can go, and it is a challenge for a modern person. I can only imagine how much harder it was if you had to make your own material. So I have much respect for those illuminators. So that's it for my prize play. And
sorry, I keep going into the chat, and then I have to. There you go. Sorry about that.
Oh yeah, I lifted that. Just lifted the whole damn thing. It was great. That was perfect. I couldn't have asked for a better example.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, and that is from. See, I wanted something from the Renaissance, and I grabbed the book. I can tell you that is from Rome, about 1545. So not a bad time period. It's called the Crucifixion. Nothing clever about that. But yeah. Then my next piece is oh look, you added the sketch in. Yeah.
So, oh my gosh. I love
Thank you.
Sketch, but yeah.
So the next piece is going to be a divider page or a carpet page or whatever you want to call it. And it was, it's for, I say was, because it is a was. Let's face it, it's a was. But this page is supposed to be the divider page for where we're adding all the individual heraldry, right? This is of the scholars. Right? I got that right. Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it was talking about people who have gone through a lot of dedicated practice and memorization and learning, and just been here a lot. And so I was trying to find a layout that would represent that. And I looked at a bunch of sources before I finally came out with one. And I like to do thumbnail sketches. It helps me a lot. I think most of us do thumbnail sketches, although I think there's some talented ones among us who go right into the page. And I don't know how you do that. You're amazing. But I have to plan everything out. So there's my planning stage. Very scribbly, but I know what's going on, so that's all that matters. Next page. Thank you. I had planned it out and did the basic outline actually on the computer, because it's nice because you can take it and zoom it and smoosh it and make it big and lay it out, and it's freaking fantastic. But the printing of it was, if you can imagine taking a black line and fading it out to be about like 15% of the black, you can barely see it when it's printed out. It's like literally like a white piece of paper is coming out of the printer because it's so light. But I was really nervous about this piece, so I did it twice. I also was concerned about the colors. And so this was a printout on just plain white paper, and me experimenting with the different tools. And you can see here, I at one point was considering blue backgrounds, but the design here is pretty much some medieval style border work. The circle is the garter belt, because all the scholars, whether it's regular scholar or free scholar, they've got garter belts. I've got furies for animals. And then I've got this, I love this wonderful ribbon work that I found on a piece, because I wanted to bring something Renaissance into it. And I remember the main piece of the garter belt and the frames and everything, that's all from early Renaissance style piece. And as word is to Renaissance, so then I threw the medieval style border around it. Played with the inks, the whole 9 yards. So this was my scratch page. And then we'll go to the next page, which is more scratch page. We're playing with colors, basically. I also tried a green background, can you tell? Yeah, and I had planned on filling the garters in. Oh, you've got a lot of history. Look at this. Yeah, I had I'd filled in the dark green work and some of the line work first. And you can see on this is the final piece, and you can see the light printouts. So this took a long time. It's in stages. You go to the next slide.
Mm-hmm.
And here we go. I think I took this picture. I was on the last freaking step. I am starting to put in all these color and all these fleur-de-lis in gold, and those are a very particular symbol. It's a lily, just like you would expect the French to have, but it's one that's specific to Florence. I think Vic's example images, you saw like a bunch of different fleur-de-lis, lilies. And I looked at it, you didn't have the Florence one. The one that makes it Florence is, if you see the little diagonal lines coming out of the center of the lily, it's really hard to do tiny. Oh my God. But that's really what makes it Florence. So that way it was Italian and not French. I was like, how do I make this Italian? And Greg told me about the symbol for Florence, so it was solved. And then I ended up going with the silver background. Out of all the colors I picked, I decided, silver background for the Sanyo animals around the side. And yeah, I'm nearing the end. And oh yeah, this is the sad final picture. So the reason this is not done, and never will be done, is I was just was getting really good with that fine ink brush where you dip it, or you can load it. You can actually load the ink with a brush into your pen. And I was outlining all of those freaking fleur-de-lis so you could see them. Because much of the gilded work, if you look in the manuscripts, not all of it, but a lot of it has outlines around it. Because it really helps it stand out, and gold's important, so you want it to stand out. And so I was getting really good with that. We could have also used a modern micron pen, but I felt like it looked too modern. I had used it in a bunch of other places, and it never quite sat with me. But by this time, I had practiced enough with the dip pen. I'm like, I got this. I can do this, and I did, except for the point where I dipped the pen in, and I brought it towards me before lifting it all the way out of the bottle. And you can tell that it was sitting next to, if you see that big dark shadow, that's where it spilled as I pulled it towards me. It was like, it was the nightmare. It was the thing that you're like, this is why we don't do things by hand anymore. But yeah, I did my best to clean that off. I haven't actually used real parchment, the animal skin, but I have a feeling that you can take a little blade and flick that stuff off. Can't really do that so much with paper. So anyway, got real close, guys. Got to do it again though. Whole thing all over again. But there you go. There's my sad tale of what can happen. I'm only a little scared. But now that I have done this, I think the next version, the final version, hopefully the final version, I will fill more of the area. I was actually worried about the competition of the viney carpet, the viney borders against the elements. I wanted to make sure of the scholars and the elements in the middle were still the largest and loudest. And I was worried about adding too much pattern. But I'm not worried about that anymore. So next one, you take this opportunity to change it and just like fill the whole thing with viney vines. I think that'd look really cool. All right, so that is my sad tale of the scholars. Almost done, almost frickin' done. Just a couple more lines left. Okay, so here's my inspiration pieces. This big blue circle on the left, you can see obviously that's where I got the concept for the garter, and that is French. It's blue background with a gold fleur-de-lis, so absolutely. And I loved the little viney work, the ribbons. The ribbons on those little cherubs were great, and I saw those shields. And I thought, oh, this is great. I can put the 4 animals in shields. And I saw the different shield shapes, and I had fun with that. And then if you look at the top image, that is the second page. It goes with that circular image. And I want to say that's called white vine. Actually, I can tell you. It's called white vine, and it's later. It's early Renaissance. It's past medieval, I believe. It is from 1460 to 70. So I really liked the shape of that border. I thought that was really neat, how the border ended, and then it had a little like bloop. It didn't go all the way across, all the way around. I liked that it was broken. That gave me some opportunity to make the centerpiece very, very big. Because if I had the border go all the way up to sides, I'd have to shrink the center, and I wanted the center to be as big as possible. So that was my solution to end the border, because most of the other viney borders from earlier pieces didn't end. They were solid. There's a reason they called it carpet. So I took that shape, but used the viney border that you see on the right with those little leaves. And that's where I got that from. And then the animals, of course, came from Fury and his Sanyo. So I actually tried to draw blow those fuckers up. And sorry, I swear a lot. I started to blow them up. They're very hard to look at. They're tiny, and they're not very detailed. They relied a lot on the text to be able to tell what they were. But I did my best, and used a little artistic license to fill in some, I don't know what that is, and then kind of made some stuff up to fill in the gaps. And the colors came from different bestiaries I saw. When I think that, what did I do? I put the lynx as blue instead of the tiger. I think tigers are blue in some of the bestiaries, and somebody gave me advice to make the lynx the tiger purple and the lynx blue, and I can't remember who that was. I'm wondering if one of you guys remember what that was from. Anyway, so
it might have been me.
Yeah. Might have been.
Maybe the lynx purple and the tiger blue. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, the colors of the animals come from the bestiaries, which are they don't necessarily worry about using colors found in nature, and they're really fun. They're really fun. So I was like, sure, purple cat, I love it. Let's do it. And that's where we got what we have today, which is still sitting over there in my little folder. Every time I look at it, I just shake my head and put it away again. So someday I will be mentally prepared to do that again. Someday soon, I hope. And that's my sad tale.
If you guys are interested in the colors of the cats, talk to Greg about that. Because I got those colors from him to do the big Sanyo in the studio, and then I think I passed it along to you.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. But
I couldn't remember if it was you or Greg. I could have sworn it was one of you, but I can't remember who. But anyway.
So does anybody have any questions? I want to chime in.
I brought a
Becky.
prop too. I really honest to God, I used these. I did.
Nice.
And there's a light on it too. These are
That's great.
They come with different magnifications. These are the best. So if you ever want to get into illuminating manuscripts, get yourself some of these, especially if you're over 40.
So I think Vic had a question in the chat. Vic, I don't know if you want to just chime in.
Yeah, I was wondering if the gold foil gave you any trouble when you were working with it so finely with the fleur-de-lis.
So gold foil on top of ink sticks. It sticks bad. My process was, yeah, I'm sorry. I wish I had better news for you, but it sticks bad. It almost sticks to the ink. Even if the ink's completely dry and been dry for days, if not weeks, if you put the gold foil on it, and then you take the brush, so you paint the glue down, you put the gold foil down, and then you take a real fine floofy brush, and then you try to just like blow away the stuff that's not on the glue. Like, go stuff, you're not on the glue, you don't belong. And then you just brush it and you brush it, and there's just like these bits that just stay. And you're like, you don't have glue under you. Why are you staying? And the only way I could get it off was to take an X-Acto knife, just ever so delicately coax it off of the ink.
Okay.
And it'll work, but you've got that extra cleanup step to coax it off, because the ink just makes it stick. It mistakes the ink for glue. But it doesn't necessarily hurt the ink area.
Okay.
But that's my experience.
Have any of you put the foil down before inking then?
Yeah, but I find that that's a mistake.
Okay.
If you're using pencil. So for me, if I used any pencil, then the gold becomes tarnished. Like the dirt from your hands and the grime from, at least on my pages. So I've always been doing the gilding last. and that ends up being the nicest quality of
Okay.
the leaf.
Even
Yeah.
with the glue over the pencil marks?
Oh, well then, so usually I'll erase all the pencil.
Sure.
So yeah, so I am usually drawing mine out with pencil.
Right.
And so if I plan to have an outline, I'll use an ink pen or ink to draw the outline. Then I'll erase the pencil. So then I have a clean surface, and you can either, paint, do your painting with your ink, or lay down your glue for the leaf. But I've been doing the leaf last, and I actually haven't encountered problems with the leaf sticking to the paint. So that's really interesting. I mean, I've had it, come off and fleck all over, and yeah, you have to like brush it off. But I haven't had to fight with it much on top of the paint or the ink, the colored portions, the inked portions.
Great.
So I've had both of those problems. So I've done a lot of different experiments myself, and I've come to find that the quintessence page is the first one that I gilded first, because I had so much trouble with Jesse's pages that I did a lot of X-Acto knife scraping to get gild off some of the fine lines that I had painted. And part of it, when I ended up getting to the quintessence page, is when I added some. I've noticed that the paint has to go into multiple layers, which is what I think the gild is sticking to. The metal is sticking to are layers of paint. So if I have like one layer of paint down or 2 layers of paint, I have no problem. But the moment that I deal with certain colors where it requires some opacity, I end up doing more scraping than anything, and it's a real pain in the ass.
So maybe gilding after the first layer of paint, after the first coat of paint, and then you can build on top of ink on top of that.
Totally. I totally think that that's a perfectly fine way to do it. And I think it all depends on like how you are doing your painting on your own, what techniques you figured out tend to work. Right. I've noticed that in recent years, I've started adding a little bit of white to my pigments to make them a little more opaque. Okay. And there's actually a separate white that you can buy that's a really concentrated white, because I found that I would put so much white over white and it was so translucent. And so I ended up getting a different white that was just more concentrated that seemed to work a lot better for the whites. But yeah, when I mix white into the colors, it would allow me to put less layers on, which hopefully would be less sticking of the metal. But yeah. Right.
So my garter, when I was filling in the fleur-de-lis, just the fleur-de-lis, not the borders, not anything else, just the fleur-de-lis was a solid 8 hours of work. I happened to have a Saturday or Sunday, and it was 8 hours.
Oh, I believe it.
And that was just getting the gold on and then scraping it off to be the shape that I wanted. And then another day I did the inking. And then you know what happened.
Right here. I think we've got one more slide, but basically we're in the questions phase. So thank you everybody for joining us today and for listening to us talk about something that we love, our artwork. But yeah, does anybody else have anything else they want to know about?
Hey, Heather.
Yeah.
Heather, how many pages do we have in the Guildbook at this point? Do you know?
Yeah, so the total count, including artwork pages and pages that are printed pages or pre-existing pages before we started our artwork, is 89.
Wow. Wow. That's
I think that's the count that's physically in the book.
Why am I in this call? I've only done 2.5. Jesus, you guys are going.
And I was just getting asked by Tasha here and told her the idea is ultimately to also create a digital repository of this, correct? So people can kind of see the entire book as it develops.
I don't think we thought about that, but I don't see why not.
I mean, I know we've talked about developing a blog post with kind of a gallery that can be expanded or not. And, but yeah, it just occurs to me that that may be something that we might want to look at further. Because it is really amazing. And it's, you know, when you see it like this, it reminds you how much work goes into this and how little we get a chance to actually see it. I mean, most people see this at best once a year or so, maybe twice.
Yeah.
So, well, I'll tell you guys, one of the things I really like is, you know, Tasha and I have gone through an awful lot of medieval manuscripts. And it's cool because when they come out of a shop where you can see there were several artists at work, you can always tell where you go from one artist to another artist because they have a different style. And so it's cool because you each have a very definite visual sensibility to your work. But to my mind, that really makes it feel all the more like a period piece because you can see you can see all the individual personalities coming together to create a whole, much like the four animals creating a quintessence. So very, very impressive.
A medieval dad joke.
Yeah, well, you know, it's what I got on a Friday night at 8:30.
Sure.
Yeah. So, but really, truly, truly gorgeous. Is there any one page? I mean, Becky, you know, you've got PTSD because you destroyed the page. But is there any one page that you guys have worked on where you're like, oh, I hated doing this one?
Oh.
No.
Like, and it could be
No,
not because you didn't like it, the final work artistically, but just because like, oh God, that was like so much more difficult than I thought it would be.
No.
Oh, good. So you're just masochists. Excellent. Okay. I can just keep exploiting that. That's good to know.
I mean, they all have, you know, their ups and downs, right? I mean, they all have their issues.
Okay.
You know, I found the quintessence page personally aggravating when I was reading this. I'm sorry, Greg, but you had me read this book. And I don't think I found the chapter on alchemy until it was like 200 pages in. I was like, here's what I want. Like,
Wow.
I couldn't get anything I needed out of a good chunk of it until I got to these last few chapters. But I'm not one to read ahead. I tend to think that there's a whole lot of other information there that I'd be missing. But like quintessence was like hard as hell to figure out. It's like a secretive society that no one will tell me about.
Yeah, but while you were reading that, you weren't cornering me at practice asking questions. So it was like a win-win.
Yes. I'm sorry, Greg, but I had to follow what you wanted me to do for my armor. I couldn't just wing it.
Yeah.
What's the name of the book?
It was here. I have it written down in my massive paper I wrote myself. It says it's by oh crap. Richard Keckenhofer. Am I saying that right? It's called Magic in the Middle Ages.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Chester, it kind of takes a look at how kind of all it's a book on kind of how all the various late antiquity beliefs kind of coalesce with just folk traditions to create kind of medieval magical thought, and you know, and then kind of re-emerges with neoclassicism into alchemy. So it's not a big book, but it is definitely a dry book. So
Yes.
Those are the best kinds.
It didn't help that I was reading it before I would go to bed, so I think I'd get half a chapter in and be zonked out and wake up at like 10 a.m. with a book in my face.
So what you're saying is I made you smarter and you got great sleep.
I don't know about that. I mean, don't get me wrong. It was a great book for what it was, but what I really needed out of it was really not until the last couple of chapters. But Greg touched on a book earlier, a couple lectures ago on C.S. Lewis. did not C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, it's C.S. Lewis, The Discarded Image.
Oh yeah, The Discarded Image. I did one of my book reports for my Free Scholar Prize was on that book, and that book had a lot of good stuff in there about medieval thought of the time.
Yeah, I was just talking today about possibly doing a reading group on it because it's such a good little book. So
yeah, I think that's a great idea.
all right. Well, are there any other questions for anybody? All right, I think you're off the hook. So, hey everybody, it's kind of hard to do digitally, but a digital round of applause for the artists, huh? Everybody else has their speakers off. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Assume that the other 38 are clapping. So,
Wow,
yeah,
we have
really,
80 pages?